Homelander Laser Eyes Season 1 Crowd Scene Finale Oval Office Fight 5 Seasons, 7 years of storytelling. One of the most terrifying villains ever put on television. And when the moment finally came, when Butcher stood across from Homelander in the Oval Office, ready for the fight fans had waited years for, something felt off. Not wrong in an obvious way, not wrong enough to ruin the moment, but off. Like when you rewatch a magic trick and suddenly you can see where the magician hid the card. And the more you think about it, the worse it gets. Today we are breaking down exactly what happened in The Boys Season 5 finale, why the final fight against Homelander does not fully hold up to scrutiny, and what this show did to its own established rules to get that crowbar moment across the finish line. Also, and this one actually hurts, we need to talk about what they did to the Gen V characters, or rather, what they did not do. Stay with me, this one is layered. Season 1 3 highlights, Herogasm Scene, Butcher with Temp V. Before we get into the problems, let me give credit where it is absolutely due. Because the criticism only matters if you understood what this show was capable of. Seasons 1 through 3 of The Boys were some of the best superhero storytelling ever made. Not just on streaming, in any medium. The show understood something that most superhero properties refuse to admit. Power without accountability is just a different name for fascism. And it wrapped that idea inside one of the most entertaining, disgusting, hilarious, and genuinely moving shows on television. The Herogasm showdown at the end of Season 3, Chef's Kiss. Butcher, Soldier Boy, and Huey all juiced up on Temp V, throwing everything they had at Homelander and still barely scratching him. That fight worked because the power levels made sense. 3 strong characters, 1 clearly stronger villain. You felt the weight of it. The hopelessness, the desperation. That is the benchmark. That is what every fight in this show should be measured against. Season 4 stumbled a little. Good ideas, some shaky execution in the middle, but it stuck the landing with a fascinating finale. So heading into Season 5, the expectations were high but fair. Give us a proper ending. Give us a fight that tops Herogasm. Send this thing off right. And Season 5 starts strong. Atrain's arc, his redemption, his death, is genuinely one of the best character conclusions the show has ever done. But then, somewhere around the midpoint, the seams start to show. Black Noir 2 scenes, the deep underwater footage here is a word that superhero fans both love and hate, power scaling. It is the act of tracking how strong each character is relative to everyone else. And it matters, not because we need a spreadsheet, but because when a story breaks its own internal rules to force a plot outcome, audiences feel it, even if they cannot immediately name what feels wrong. The Boys Season 5 starts breaking those rules before we even get to the finale. Let us talk about Black Noir II. The show introduces a new noir in Season 4, Bulletproof, capable of flight, a legitimately dangerous suit. And then in Season 5 he gets killed by the Deep. The Deep, who has spent most of the series being the most pathetic member of the Seven. His primary power is talking to fish. He is basically the Aquaman of this universe, except nobody even respects him enough to make a movie about him. How does the Deep, a character who has been dominated and humiliated repeatedly, suddenly have enough power to take out a bulletproof, flying soup? The show does not give us a satisfying answer. It just needs Black Noir gone so the Deep does it and we move on. That should have been a warning sign. Because if the writers are already bending their own logic this early, what happens when we get to the main event? Homelander injecting V1, laser eye scenes, Season 1 flashback. Let us talk about V1. The original compound V, Frederick Vaught's first successful formula, the one that created Soldier Boy, the one that made Sups essentially immortal and resistant to biological decay. In Season 5, Homelander gets his hands on V1, he injects it, he falls to the ground, his powers surge, he shoots lasers into the sky. This is presented as a massive moment, Homelander becoming something even beyond what he already was. And then in the finale, he loses a fistfight to Butcher. Now, to be fair, Kimiko does use a radioactive blast that strips Homelander of his powers first, which is why Butcher can finish him with the crowbar. That mechanic is fine. The show had been building toward Kimiko's radiation ability for a while, and using it as the key to defeating Homelander is actually a clever callback to the logic of the universe. But here is the problem. Before Kimiko gets that shot off, Homelander is fighting both Butcher and Ryan in the Oval Office, and he is struggling. Not losing badly, but struggling. And if you have been watching this show since Season 1, that does not track. Earlier in the very same season, Homelander grabbed an Elon Musk stand-in and carried him into space in seconds. Just grabbed him and was gone. Zero efforts. But he cannot do that to Butcher and Ryan while they are grappling with him on the ground. And there is the Kimiko laser problem. In the same season, Homelander uses his laser eyes on Kimiko and cuts clean through her legs, clean through. But in the finale, the same lasers hit her and she just gets pushed against a wall. Not cut, not badly injured, just pushed. Same character, same power, same season, two completely different results. Butcher fighting Bombsight, Season 3 Butcher on Temp V. This brings us to Butcher, and honestly this one is the hardest to explain away. A few episodes before the finale, Butcher gets absolutely dominated by Bombsight. Not a close fight. Dominated. Bombsight puts him on the ground and Butcher is helpless. So Butcher, a normal human at this point, with no Temp V, no special serum, goes from being destroyed by a mid-tier soup to going toe-to-toe with Homelander in the finale. Homelander, who in Season 3 required 3 powered-up fighters including Soldier Boy to barely hold his own against. What changed between those two moments? Nothing that the show explains clearly. Butcher did not get a power-up. He did not drink anything or inject anything or gain some new ability. He just got better because the plot needed him to be there for the ending. And that is the central issue. The finale requires Butcher to be strong enough to matter in that fight, but the show does not earn it. It borrows against logic it does not have and hopes the emotional payoff of the scene is enough to cover the debt. For a lot of viewers, it worked. The crowbar moment is iconic. Anthony Starr's performance in those final scenes is genuinely extraordinary. The way Homelander tries to fly after his powers are gone and just pathetically bounces off the ground is one of the funniest, most satisfying things the show has ever done. But underneath that satisfaction is a framework that does not hold weight. Gen V clips: Marie Morrow, Jordan Lee, Emma, Kate. Now we have to talk about Gen V, and this one is not just a writing problem. This one involves a real-world decision that made everything worse before the finale even aired. Gen V was The Boys spin-off set at Godolphin University. It introduced Marie Morrow, a blood manipulator whose entire second season arc was built around her developing enough power to become a genuine threat to Homelander. That was the explicit setup. The show was pointing at The Boys Season 5 from the beginning. There was also Jordan Lee, a soup who can shift between two physically distinct power sets. Kate, a touch-based telepath who can literally get inside someone's mind and override their will. Emma, who shifts size and has shown considerable combat ability. These are not background characters. These were built as the next generation of heavy hitters. And then two things happened. First, Amazon canceled Gen V mid-Season 5, right in the middle of the final stretch of The Boys. Before the Gen V characters had even shown up in the main show, audiences already knew they were not going to matter because their show was dead. Second, showrunner Eric Kripke had to go on record and say, and this is a real quote, that Gen V is not required viewing for Season 5. He told people to be prepared for the Gen V kids to not come in and save the season. His words. Now, to his credit, Kripke said this was about keeping the ending focused on the characters audiences had followed for 5 years. That is a legitimate creative argument. You do not want your series finale hijacked by a spin-off's cast. But here is the counter-argument. Marie Morrow shows up in the finale. So does Jordan, so does Emma. They are just given nothing to do. Marie, who is literally being hyped as a future Homelander killer, is assigned crowd control. She escorts Homelander survivors to Canada. That is her role in the finale of the series she was built to effect. And then the show explains in Season 5 that the Gen V kids are not ready, which directly contradicts 2 seasons of Gen V, where Marie nearly dies multiple times pushing the limits of her abilities and growing into a fighter who understands exactly what she is up against. The fan reaction was immediate and ugly. Quotes from social media: one person said they watched 2 seasons of Gen V for absolutely nothing. Another said Gen V was officially useless in the final season of The Boys. These are not fringe takes. This is a widespread sentiment from a significant portion of the audience. Here is the thing that makes it worse. Think about what the finale could have been. If Marie had used her blood manipulation to grip Homelander, literally reach inside his circulatory system and hold him in place, you solve the problem of Homelander inexplicably not flying away. Because he physically cannot. If Kate had gotten inside his head using her touch ability, you create a scene where the most terrifying mind in the show is suddenly the one being violated and controlled. That is devastating irony. That is the kind of storytelling this show does at its best. Instead, we got a fight in the Oval Office that Games Radar called not exactly the scorched earth that was promised. Homelander bouncing when trying to fly, crowbar moment, character final scenes. I want to be fair here, because despite everything we just talked about, the finale is not a disaster. The character conclusions are mostly solid. A Train had already been given one of the best send-offs earlier in the season. Frenchie dies meaningfully. Huey gets the ending his arc has been building toward. the show resolves most of its threads with genuine care for who these people are. The crowbar moment, Homelander getting his skull caved in by Butcher, is earned emotionally even if it is not earned mechanically. And watching Anthony Starr perform a broken, powerless Homelander trying and failing to fly is genuinely one of the most purely satisfying moments in the entire series. 5 years of watching this man terrify everyone around him, and his final moment is a pathetic little hop followed by nothing. That is perfect. The finale also gets credit for not overstaying its welcome with empty spectacle. Some critics pointed out that compared to Stranger Things or Game of Thrones, the scale felt small, but The Boys has always been about ideas more than destruction. A small final fight in the Oval Office is thematically appropriate. This show was never really about the explosions. And look, power scaling problems are not unique to The Boys. Cobra Kai has them. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has entire YouTube channels dedicated to cataloging theirs. Dragon Ball has been running on narrative convenience for 4 decades. This is not a capital crime. It is a known weakness of long-running shows where characters evolve and writers make new story needs. The Boys just set a high enough standard early on that its inconsistencies feel more jarring than they would elsewhere. Season 1 Homelander, Season 3 Herogasm, finale Aftermath. So what do we actually take away from all of this? Here is my read. The Boys Season 5 was caught between 2 obligations that pulled against each other. Obligation 1, give the original cast the ending they deserve. Obligation 2, honor the extended universe that was built around this show. Because Amazon canceled Gen V, Obligation 2 became impossible. And because Krypton had to pivot around a missing piece of the story, Obligation 1 got squeezed into a shape that does not quite fit the logic the show built for itself. That is not a creative failure. That is a business decision made above the writing room that the writers then had to paper over as best they could. And they mostly did. The finale is functional. It is emotionally resonant in the ways that matter most. But it is not the all-timer it could have been. The Herogasm fight in Season 3 remains the peak of this show's action storytelling, and nothing in Season 5 beats it, not because the finale was lazy, but because the pieces were not all in place. The Boys deserved a final fight where every card it had spent 5 seasons on the table at once. Instead, half the deck got pulled before the hand was dealt. That is not a failure of craft. That is television is made inside a corporation. End credits aesthetic VOT rising teaser. The Boys is over, and overall, it is a show that earned its place in the conversation. 7 years, 5 seasons, and one of the most genuinely dangerous pieces of pop culture satire that mainstream television has ever greenlit. That legacy is real, regardless of what the finale got wrong. The VOT Rising prequel is already in production, Jensen Ackles returning as Soldier Boy in what looks like a Cold War-era VOT story. Whether that scratches the itch or opens new ones remains to be seen. But for now, the main run is done. Homelander is dead. The Boys won. The logic was a bit shaky getting there. And honestly, that is kind of perfect for a show that spent 5 seasons pointing out that the things we are told to celebrate rarely survive close inspection. If this video made you think about the show differently, hit the like button and drop your take in the comments. Did the finale earn it for you, or did the power scaling pull you out of the moment? I want to know where you land. See you in the next one.